Imagine destroying a $50 billion relationship over peeling paint. It sounds absurd, but in the high-stakes world of aviation, this was no joke. It was the spark that ignited a vicious corporate war. On one side stood Qatar Airways. They are the self-proclaimed perfectionists of the skies. On the other stood Airbus, the European titan that builds half the world's commercial jets. For months, the industry watched in horror. These two giants traded lawsuits and insults. They threatened to ground fleets and bankrupt strategies. But beneath the headlines lay a darker question. Was this truly a catastrophic safety crisis? Or was it a calculated billion-dollar bluff that backfired? The trouble began innocently enough. It started with preparations for the 2022 World Cup. Qatar Airways decided to repaint a flagship jet. But when engineers stripped away the white coating, they found something disturbing. The paint was cracking and bubbling. It exposed the layer beneath. This underlying layer is the expanded copper foil. It is a critical mesh designed to protect the aircraft from lightning. Qatar Airways immediately sounded the alarm. They claimed the exposed mesh was dangerous. They said it turned fuel tanks into ticking time bombs. However, Airbus looked at the same data and shrugged. They insisted the issue was purely cosmetic. Ugly, yes, but completely safe to fly. The battle lines were drawn, but nobody expected how dirty the fight was about to get. At the center of this storm was Akbar al-Bakr. He was the CEO of Qatar Airways at the time. He was known for his aggressive management style. Al-Bakr was not a man who heard the word no very often. He had a reputation for humiliating suppliers. He would ground deliveries over the tiniest imperfections. This time, he decided to play hardball on a massive scale. He publicly shamed Airbus. He accused them of negligence. Then he grounded 13 A350 jets. It was a classic power move. He wanted to force the manufacturer into a corner. He wanted massive compensation. Al-Bakr was betting that Airbus would panic. He thought they would pay up to save their reputation. It was a bullying tactic that had worked in the past, but he made a fatal error in judgment. He wasn't dealing with a small vendor. He was dealing with a global duopoly. Instead of bowing down, Airbus hit the nuclear button. In a move that shocked the aviation world, they fought back. The manufacturer invoked a specific legal mechanism. It is known as a cross-default clause. Because Qatar refused to take the A350s, Airbus declared a breach of contract. They retaliated by canceling a completely separate order. They wiped out a deal for 50 A321 jets. This was catastrophic for Qatar. The A321 is the most in-demand plane in the world. It is essential for the airline's future growth. In a single stroke, the supplier fired the customer. It was an unprecedented act of corporate warfare. Analysts were stunned. Al-Bakr had tried to use the grounding as leverage. In response, Airbus simply took away his future fleet. Caught on the back foot, Qatar Airways made a desperate pivot. They immediately placed an order with Airbus's rival, Boeing. They bought the 737 MAX. The irony here was staggering. Qatar Airways was grounding the A350. This was a plane with 0 fatal crashes in its history. Yet they were rushing to buy the 737 MAX, a plane that had been grounded globally following 2 tragic disasters. This move fueled rampant speculation. Many analysts suggested this wasn't about safety at all. The theory was simple. Travel demand was low during the pandemic. Qatar simply didn't want to pay for new jets they couldn't fly. By claiming the planes were defective, they could halt payments. They could save cash. But as the World Cup approached, this strategy began to crumble. With the A350 fleet grounded, Qatar faced a nightmare. They had a massive influx of passengers expected, but they did not have enough planes to carry them. Desperate, the airline was forced to unretire their old jets. Even more embarrassingly, they brought back the A380 Super Jumbos. This was a bitter pill for Al Baker to swallow. He had publicly bashed the A380. He called the double-decker plane a big mistake. Now, the perfectionist airline was forced to fly them. They had to patch up the very planes the CEO had rejected. The zombie fleet was in the air. It was a flying testament to a strategy gone wrong, and things were about to get much worse in the courtroom. The conflict eventually landed in the London High Court. Here, the bluff began to unravel completely. Qatar Airways sued for $2 billion. They doubled down on the claim that the A350 was unsafe. But the judge wasn't interested in media theatrics. He wanted raw data. Meanwhile, Airbus played their ace card. They revealed that other major airlines had the same issue. Lufthansa and Singapore Airlines saw the same peeling paint. The difference was how they handled it. None of those airlines grounded their fleets. They treated it as a cosmetic maintenance issue. They kept flying. The narrative collapsed. It became clear that Qatar was the only airline treating this as a crisis. The grounding looked less like a safety measure. It looked more like a commercial tactic. Just days before the trial began, everything changed. A trial would have forced Qatar to reveal internal documents. It could have exposed their true motivations. Suddenly, the two parties announced a settlement. The terms were secretive, but the outcome spoke volumes. Qatar Airways dropped the lawsuit. They agreed to take the A350s they had refused. They got their A321 orders reinstated. However, they lost their place in line. They now faced delays pushing into 2026. The airline had grounded its fleet. They had sued their partner. They had dragged their reputation through the mud. And they ended up right back where they started. Only now they had massive delays and legal fees. Shortly after the dust settled, the final domino fell. Akbar al-Baker abruptly resigned. After 27 years, it was the end of an era. The Great Paint War serves as a brutal lesson. It shows the limits of corporate ego. What started as a repairable cosmetic issue spiraled out of control. It cost hundreds of millions of dollars. It reactivated a fleet of unwanted zombie planes. It proved that the dynamic has shifted. Airlines might sign the checks, but manufacturers hold the power. Al Baker played a high-stakes game of chicken. He thought the customer is always right. He learned the hard way. When you push a manufacturer too far, they have a choice. They can simply sell their planes to someone else.